Hello, everyone. I'm Bo from Brutal Commentary, and today I'm going to be breaking down our featured fight for UFC 263. In this one, we have Jeremiah Wells taking on Themba Gorimbo. Wells is 12-4-1 as a professional, 3-2 in his last five fights. Meanwhile, Gorimbo is 14-5 as a professional, 4-1 in his last five fights. For Wells, he was on a pretty good win streak to start his UFC career. He had submitted Blood Diamond via rear naked choke, knocked out Court McGee, and in his last win, which was about 2.5 years ago, he fought Matthew Sellersberger to a split decision. But since then, he's currently on a two-fight skid, getting submitted by Carlston Harris in a fight where Wells was winning up until he made a critical error in the grappling in the third round and got choked via an anaconda choke. Choked via an anaconda choke. And then in his most recent fight, which is almost now 2 years, he lost a close fight to Max Griffin, which, granted, should have gone Wells' way, but it seemed, Max Griffin did just enough to win. Meanwhile, for Themba Gorimbo, it was quite an interesting story with him as, there were stories of how poor he was, living in the gym, of getting help with gym mate Colby Covington. The Rock bought him a house. Or I forget, was it a house or a condo? Something like that. Or at least paid a year's rent of that. And, Gorimbo used that story to motivate himself as he was on a 4-fight win streak. Beat Takeshi Sato, knocked out Pete Rodriguez, defeated Ramiz Brahimaj in Brahimaj's last loss to date. That win has honestly aged very well for Gorimbo. His last win was last October against Nico Price. But in his last fight, he got choked unconscious against a clearly past his best days, Vicente Luque, last December at UFC 310. So, something quite interesting about this fight for me is that these two are very skilled, but they have clear flaws that are not too different from each other, but they kind of help the other in a way. You'll see what I mean in a minute. For Jeremiah Wells, he is built like a tank. Looks like a tank as well, and fights kind of what you would expect. At 5'9" with a 74-inch reach, Wells is on the shorter end of most of the welterweights, but very strong for this division, very explosive with his striking. Wells has power in both hands, whether it be his overhand right, his left hook, doesn't matter. I mean, he knocked out Court McGee, who, granted, is past his best days, but Court McGee is still historically pretty tough. And has pretty good wrestling as well. Wells has a good, strong double leg. And once he gets top pressure, he has some good submission games. He trains out of the Henzo Gracie gym in Philly. And they have some pretty good grapplers in that gym. That's like Sean Brady and Joe Pyfer. So I wouldn't say Wells is a complete novice on the ground. And got a good rear naked choke. But overall, I think Wells' best attributes is his forward pressure, his powerful striking game, and his durability. For Themba Gorimbo, he's similar in the vein of Wells, where he's a physical specimen, but a bit different. A lot more lanky for welterweight at 6'1" with the 77-inch reach, but where Wells is a physical tank, Gorimbo is, like I said, much more of a tall, lanky striker, but a much better grappler, I would say. While Gorimbo's striking has definitely improved, he's got good long-range striking, specifically his calf kicks, his stinging jab, good T-kicks up the middle, and has some deceptive power. He did knock out Pete Rodriguez, with what seemingly was one punch, or one solid punch at least, Andy. But I will say, it sounded like he hit a bat against Pete Rodriguez. That being said, Gorimbo's not very well known for his power, but again, he's got at least stinging power and can definitely hurt his opponents. I would say Gorimbo's best attribute is his slick grappling, as one of Gorimbo's best attributes in the grappling department is more so his ability to get the back from odd angles. Not like your traditional, you shoot the takedown in, your opponent gives up their back, and then you take it. It's more like Gorimbo kind of flows with position, and then as their opponent is trying to transition him off, Gorimbo is then able to snatch his hooks in. Or like when he fought Nico Price, and Nico Price was trying to tripod. Gorimbo was very good at getting the how do you pronounce that? The Solovian sleeve or knee bar, I believe is how you pronounce it. It's that knee bar that you get once you're on the opponent's back and then you grab the leg and start pulling it straight up like a lever. Now, I'm not saying he has that on his record. I am saying, though, Gorimbo is pretty good at harassing the balance of his opponents, especially when they're up against a cage. And overall, I think Gorimbo has very good cardio. He can put in 15 minutes of solid work, where Wells tends to kind of fade in fights. And that's one of the big reasons he lost to Carlson Harris, is because he started getting tired and started having lapses in judgment. That's how Harrison was able to get the submission on him. Now, as I said earlier, these two have clear flaws, and their flaws kind of help one another. For Jeremiah Wells, he's like I said, for all of his physical gifts and very good and very strong on the front foot, he does tend to fade later in fights. And as I had just said, that's how he lost his fight to Harrison, but it's also kind of how he lost his fight to Max Griffin. Now, in the Max Griffin fight, Wells was uncharacteristically passive and more so on the back foot in that fight. Didn't even really use his wrestling in a fight that was really close. And you'd think if Wells had wrestled, he probably would have gotten the decision. And now, a bunch of injuries has also affected Wells, and he's been on the shelf for as long as he has. Like I said, about a year and 8 months. It's almost 2 years. You got to wonder how much wear and tear is on his body, as well as is also 39, and he'll be 40 not too long. So that is pretty old for welterweight. Meanwhile, for Gorimbo, his biggest weakness, I would say, is his inability to fight under pressure. In one of his losses, specifically to AJ Fletcher, when Fletcher was able to transition and from when Gorimbo had the back and Fletcher was able to get top mount. From there, it looked like Gorimbo just didn't know what to do, and Fletcher used that momentum or that shift in the fight and then kind of stole it from Gorimbo. As Gorimbo just does not work very well under pressure, and for all of his talent, he does just tend to kind of wilt under the fire. And now, when he lost to Vicente Luque, that's not really as much what happened, but you can say it did, as Luque was able to pressure Gorimbo early, get a knockdown with his striking, and then cinch up the Anaconda choke. Now, let me be very clear on this. I'm not going to pick against Themba Gorimbo specifically because he lost to Vicente Luque. Even a clear, wash Vicente Luque can still get some wins against, the kind of mid-tier to lower end of the welterweight division. So I'm not going to strictly base this prediction off going, oh, you lost to that guy? Well, I can't pick this guy no matter what. Styles make fights at the end of the day, and while it's true you're only as good as your last fight, sometimes you can have an off night, ladies. That's what I think. Or, sometimes you can have an off nights, ladies and gentlemen. That's what I truly believe. Sorry for that weird pause. This is really tricky. As, like I said, they both are very talented, but they have such clear flaws. And if Wells pressures early, he could probably get an early finish on Gorimbo. But if Gorimbo's able to kind of survive the storm, and Wells starts to fade, then Gorimbo can probably steal the fight and maybe get a late round submission. Odds-wise for this fight, Wells is a plus 110, while Gorimbo is a minus 140. It's pretty close. Odds-wise, makes sense. Like I said, when you have two fighters with glaring flaws, and then those flaws are magnified because what their opponent does best plays perfectly into the weaknesses of their opposition. It basically comes down to who's going to dictate the fight first and who's going to be able to keep the momentum of the fight. But for my prediction, I got to go with Themba Gorimbo. A lot of it has to go down to activity as well. Granted, Gorimbo hasn't fought since last December. Since then, from 2024, he fought 3 times in a year here, and that momentum definitely plays a factor in with this prediction, as Wells has been on the shelf for a year and 8 months. He did not look the same against Max Griffin, and I know what I just said, right? You can have off days, and sometimes you just, you don't show up at the office is the same as you normally do. Very true, and I stick by that. But in comparison to Gorimbo, who got, swarmed early and then submitted, Wells had 15 minutes to try and pull something out against Griffin, and he didn't do that whatsoever. It's a lot different than like you got caught to you got. I swear I'm going to sound like Jamal Hill. You got caught, I got dominated. Big difference in this though. He could have won that Max Griffin fight. It's just he just didn't pull the trigger enough and Wells didn't do enough to tilt the decision towards him, while Gorimbo got swarmed early, like I said. Plus, you got to think Wells is more of a sprinter. He looks to finish the fight early, and if he can't get it done early, then he kind of goes through his gas tank pretty quickly. While Gorimbo is, I guess you could say, a marathoner, as Gorimbo has fought through 15 minutes before. A lot of his wins are by decision, and he's able to kind of snatch the fight in late if need be. So my official prediction, I'm going to go with Themba Gorimbo. And I honestly think he can get a submission in this fight. Gorimbo has some good submissions overall, pretty good grappling. And I think he can possibly get an anaconda choke, kind of like what Harris did in Wells' fight. So, but officially, I am going with submission. I'm not really saying what exact submission Gorimbo can get. But I think the anaconda choke is not a bad idea. That being said, I can also see this fight going the distance, and if it does, I would also pick Gorimbo by decision as well. But with that being said, that's been my breakdown of this fight. If you like the video, comment and subscribe. And if specifically in the comment section, let me know what you think of this fight and who do you think will win. Next up, we'll have our co-main event with Waldo Cortez Acosta taking on Ante Delia. But until then, I've been Bo from Brutal Commentary. Thank you all for listening. Take care.